Hey, y'all, and welcome to another edition of the Unscripted Huddle, brought to you by the National Football Alliance. The NFA's purpose is to honor, improve, and advance the sport of tackle football. If you're the parent, coach, or administrator of a youth or high school player, you're in the right place. We aim to deliver an authentic voice regarding performance, safety, and the medical truth to support you and your players. My name is John Reagan. With me is Joe Rafter. Let's kick it off.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back. This is Joe Rafter, and I'm joined by
I guess it's going to be me,
crime.
John Reagan here, and
John
it's
Reagan.
great to be back. I think we've got episode 6 here going, Joe, of the Unscripted Huddle that is presented by the National Football Alliance, and we're really lucky tonight. We're going to jump right in. We're joined by another guest this week. I'm kind of going to give a little hint to our listeners here. We're telling the backstory of NFA and how it became NFA here over the last couple of weeks with our guests. You know, obviously with Peter Cummings and his expertise in neuropsychology, and that might be the wrong term, but I'm a football player, so don't hold me to it. And this week we're really excited because we've got Steve Famiano with us, and a very important piece of the puzzle when it comes to telling the story of the youth football movement in California. So I want to welcome you, Steve, and warn you that we're going to jump right into first down here and let you kind of introduce yourself, but tell us kind of your story of life as it relates to youth football and to Joe.
Yeah, thanks, John. Appreciate it. Always great to see Joe, my brother.
Always.
Yeah, we have a great history, and it's interesting how we got here. It's really interesting, and part of this story, I mean, this all relates to the Save Youth Football movement here that we had in California over the past 6 years. And that got started for me when another youth football commissioner from another league in my town here in Apple Valley, California, where I live, texted me back in 2018 with a little screenshot of a news article with the headline reading, "Lawmakers to Ban Youth Football in California." And it was really interesting. You know, sometimes in life things will hit you, and you're just like, yeah, I got to do something. And it hit me that day. I read that text and that little news article blurb, and it just hit me. And I was at work that day, sitting in my work truck, and all of a sudden, I stopped thinking about work, to be honest with you, and I started thinking about youth football, of what am I going to do about this? So it's a very long story, and I know we have very limited time. So I'll try not to get too deep.
All the pieces that you think our listeners need to hear. Do that.
Yeah.
Steve, how did you get, so tell us a little bit about, how did you get into youth football?
Yeah, that's important. So I live here in Apple Valley, California, in Southern California. We're about an hour outside of Los Angeles in the high desert region, just about 30 minutes north of San Bernardino. That gives some relevance to people. If you go to Las Vegas from San Diego or LA, you drive right by us every time. But I signed the kids up way back in the day when my boys were 7 and 9 years old with the Apple Valley Rattlers program, just as a parent. And that was back in early 2000s. And, excuse me, got the boys involved. And, you know, it's funny, when you get involved with youth sports, you kind of start seeing some of the problems with the leagues and find out that there's monetary issues and different things like that. And having, you know, being a business owner with a commercial landscape company that we have here in Apple Valley, you know, the light goes on where you think, well, wait a minute, this thing isn't being ran right. So what's the next step? You go from parent into getting involved into
Heading up the committee.
Right? That's exactly. Yeah, you rally.
Hey, I think we could do this a little better. That's a great idea. What's your name? Steve Famiano. You're in charge of that now.
That's exactly how we did it, Joe. It was like
that's how it works. Yeah.
We got other parents in the league that were business owners, and we said, hey, we got to run this thing like a business, because it wasn't being run like a business. And
right.
then 18 years later, you know, we get involved with the Save Youth Football movement, which actually took me away from running the local league here in town back in 2018. But that's what got me started in, you know, so I've done everything in youth football, right? I mean, it worked the snack bar.
I was going to say, snack bar? Did you
Right?
flip burgers, or you handing out Gatorades?
This is Southern California. We do nachos, Joe. Extra cheese. Extra cheese. Wait,
Beyond
but you know what I mean?
It's my Northern California and Philadelphia background. It's all burgers and dogs and sausages.
Dogs, yep, that's right.
Yeah, so I mean, you do it long enough, you're going to do everything in youth football, and I think that was good for me personally in getting involved with the Save Youth Football movement, because I felt comfortable knowing the sport of youth football and being able to talk about it and defend it like we did with the state of California, when this became an issue back in 2018.
So, Steve, you mentioned 6 years like that. I mean, I was there, very deeply involved at the beginning, and my role has morphed over time. I've been involved the whole time, but my role's changed. And to hear you say 6 years is like unbelievable. It was 6 years ago, and so tell us. Let's talk a little bit about, right. First one was the bill to ban, right, under the age of 14. Tell us a little bit about that piece, and let's take some quick milestone checks of the different activities along the way.
Yeah, so that first bill, 2108, AB 2108, back in 2018, it started at 14 years. Then there were some things that happened that dropped the age down to 12. And
which is a remarkable story in and of itself, John. Just real quick. Do you know why?
It's not going to be quick.
Do you know why? Why did the first bill to ban youth tackle football go from 14 years old to 12 years old? Take a guess. Any guess, John?
No, I'm not going to make that. So far out of my realm, I have no idea.
So I'm sitting in the assembly member's office, and we asked them that question. So when it first came out, it was 14, and we engaged them, and we had dialogues along the way. And then at some point, maybe like 6 weeks afterwards, it shifted, maybe 8 weeks, it shifted to 12. And we were in his office talking to him, and we said, well, why did you change it? And he said, and I'm not kidding you, like this like blew my mind. Well, I was talking to my sister who lives down in L.A., and she thought it would be better to let the kids in like 7th and 8th grade play football so they could get a little introduced to it before they started in high school. So I decided to reduce it from 14 to 12.
Based on the science.
Based on the science, based upon medicine. No. Based upon my sister's point of view.
Right.
Right?
You never would have guessed, John. It's good you didn't guess it, because you never would have guessed that. Nobody in their mind would have thought that's how you would have, decided to implement legislation. I mean, to be honest with you.
So that was 2018.
2018.
Yep. So then after that one, Steve, what happened after that?
Oh man, so much. Joe was the lead of our movement at that time in 2018, right? There was 5 of us that wound up being. Let me back up here a little bit, because there's so many. I'm telling you, this definitely should be a book. When that Save Youth Football movement started, how Save Youth Football California came to be, that'll take us back to that day I got that text message. I went home that night, and this is an interesting thing, and I was able to tell the governor this story at his governor's meeting we had with him last August, which we can talk about later if we want to. I told this story there too. So I went home that night, sat on I still have the same laptop 6 years later that I had in 2018, which I'm on right now. Sat at my kitchen table right here and thought, how am I going to get the word out that the state of California wants to do this with youth football? And I sat at my table for about 30 minutes. I was like, okay, I'm going to create a Facebook group. Never had done that before. Sorry, I hit my microphone. Never had done that before. So I was clicking, okay, how do I get a Facebook group going? And then I'm like, okay, well, what the heck am I going to call this thing? Like Save Football, Save California Football. And it just clicked in my mind. I went, Save Youth Football California. And that became our name. And I didn't know Joe then. I didn't know any of the other guys in 2018 that we were going to wind up working with at that time when I created that Facebook group. I just wanted to create that group to get the message out. And it started working. I mean, the group went from 0 to 1,000 members, 5,000. In 2018, we got up to about, I think it was about 13 or 14,000 members at that initial phase of the banned youth football movement. And then, I mean, Joe, you can jump in here too and add your perspective on this too, because it was a team effort, right? And
totally.
that's what football does for us. I've said that to so many people over the past 6 years. Football, I think, helped us. You know what I mean? We ran it like a football team, right?
John, it was really interesting. There were five of us in it, and we all played different roles. We all brought different skills and perspectives to it. But the two things that stand out for me with Steve are and was and are. When we would have these conversations, Steve a lot of times would be a little more on the quiet side. And we would talk and there'd be everyone's voice, and we're all trying to figure and we never met each other. There's five of us on a call. We never met each other. We were, I finally had to buy a Zoom account to get all of us on video so at least we could see each other's faces. And we would debate things and figure out what's the next thing that we need to do. And Steve would chime in at times and just like you could hear him speaking completely from his gut. Like, guys, this is what we need to go do. Here's what I think. And over the course of my time in knowing Steve and working with him, I've absolutely learned to trust his gut, his instinct. And I've told him that before. Like, when he talks, I listen. Like, I stop my thinking. I go, what does Steve think about this? Because he just crystallized so many points along the way. This is one thing I really, really recall and admire Steve for.
I appreciate that. Let me give you an example. And I think you're going to remember this one very well. So during that time, we had an advocate that was pushing the state of California. I'm not going to mention names. There was an advocate that was pushing support of that bill back in 2018. A female, a mom, who lost a son, blamed football, CT, all that stuff. Right. And I remember a conversation that we had one time. I don't even know if we were on Zoom. I think we might have been on the phone still. And we were trying to rack our brains on, like, what's our approach here? Who do we need on our side? Things like that. And I remember everybody talking. I think I just popped in one time and just said, we need football moms. Football moms will be and that was my gut talking. And it worked for us because it was 100% accurate at the time that people don't even look. This could be a whole nother show, right? Maybe one day you guys are going to do this. Football moms are critical to youth football.
Totally.
And they were critical to our efforts in saving youth football.
It's interesting you say that, because what I'm hearing and listening to both of you talk, and now with Peter on our last two episodes, the one thing that is so unique, I guess I feel it's unique to football, is the number of people that it brings together that wouldn't be brought together for any other reason.
Totally.
And that everybody is on the same page, pushing the same, pulling the same direction. It's just such a uniqueness, not of just youth football, but of football in general. And I think that's probably one of the things now, and I won't take us all the way on this tangent and the rabbit hole of why football is changing so much at the collegiate level and higher, because of that lack of maybe family and unity that used to be there. But there's all kinds of changes for a lot of other reasons. But it is not necessarily unique just to football, but it certainly is a uniqueness that football definitely brings out. So I appreciate that part of the story. What I'm going to do now, I'm going to take us to second down and keep us moving here. Okay. And for second down, what I'd like to do, Steve, knowing that what some of what you guys had going on, and you've shared some, and our listeners have heard other stories as well of what was going on from 2018 really through today. But take us fast forward, just having gotten maybe out of it a little bit removed and now pulled back into it. And what's the current status? What's the pulse of football in California from a youth perspective?
So yeah, we can wrap the Save Youth Football California movement up in this regard. So 2024 was a huge year. It actually was even bigger. And I don't want to discredit what we did in 2018, but 2024 was huge because what happened in 2024, we had beat previous bills in between there, and these bills never got to a point of being heard in committee. But in 2024, the committee that was hearing the bill got a new chair of that committee. And that chair of the committee made a special political deal with the author of the banned youth football bill that was reintroduced in 2023, moved into 2024. And that bill actually passed committee. That was the first time ever we had to deal with a bill passing committee, which would move that bill on to the full assembly here in California. And that bill was prepared to move on to the full assembly. So we did a lot of work behind the scenes, just some stuff that I'll probably never talk about publicly because, I want to give away all the game plan. But we were fortunate enough to get the attention of Governor Gavin Newsom. And I remember I was in Sacramento at a Denny's across from my hotel, eating dinner about 6 o'clock at night. I was up there because the next day we were going to be at the Capitol steps to do a youth football rally, which was supported by us with the Republican caucus in Sacramento. And I was going to speak at that rally. We still did the rally, but anyways, I was sitting at dinner, got a call from a reporter from Politico who had interviewed me and said, "Did you see the article?" And I went, "No, what article?" The governor had come out only to Politico and basically stated that he would veto any bill that would ban youth football in California. And that happened in January of 2024. And that basically squashed it. And then things went quiet last year for the most part. We knew the governor was still interested in meeting with us. And we were invited in last August, to the governor's mansion to a governor's youth football summit. I had the NFL, some NCAA people there, and myself and Ron White from the California Youth Football Alliance, went to this and met the governor, discussed, AB1, the California Youth Football Act, which we can talk about here in a little bit too, if you guys want to, and just some of the work that we did over the past 6 years. And it was really cool to meet the governor and, hopefully put a nail in this coffin for a while so that we can get back to focusing on being on the field and coaching our kids up and doing what we love to do in our communities.
Yeah, John, the other thing I'd add is, and we briefly mentioned this, but as we were going through this entire process, we consistently looked to the sport for guidance and advice as like a meta model for what we were trying to do. For example, there would be times where, the opposition would get a first down. They passed the committee. They scored a touchdown. Okay, well, what are we going to do? Time to go on the offense. What would we do in the game if our opponent put something up on us? What would we do? Well, we would turn around and we would battle back and we would fight and we would go on the attack. And when we would go on the attack and we'd attack and attack and attack, and then we go, okay, what do we do now? All right, let's hold. Let's hold them now. Let's not give them any more yardage, any more movement. Let's keep the ball. Let's try and keep the ball and run the clock out. Like, we were literally talking about these kinds of strategies and trying to use the sport as football coaches to advise us on what our next activities were. Just like it was a game. And that was like, I think, Steve, that was probably one of the, strategically speaking, one of the greatest ahas of the entire thing, and still to this day, our playbook is largely based upon us being football coaches, but applying that football coach rigor and discipline and mindset to a different context when we were doing that.
I think it's fair, I'll say as an outsider, obviously I hope I'm not, but at least as an outsider to those days, that's really, Joe, what has spurned the beginning and the development and the birth of the National Football Alliance. Because as you mentioned, you reached out and looked to leaders in the industry, whether they're, and again, this is not knocking what was there, what wasn't there, what support you got, the way you went about it, because obviously you were very successful. But I think the realization for you brought to me, and by your experiences, that something is needed. There is a place that is needed. There is a resource that is needed for youth programs, whether they be individual programs, whether they be state-run organizations, whether they are fighting political bills and propositions, or they're just trying to educate parents. There needs to be a place for those parents to go for information, for help, for support.
For the truth about the sport,
Sure.
about what the sport is, what it's always been, honoring it, what it needs to be next season, how we improve it, and where it should be 3 to 5 years down the road in terms of advancing it. Absolutely, John. So when Steve and Ron White and I formed the California Youth Football Alliance, I bought those URLs. I still own them, and I bought the National Football Alliance at the same time. So the URL is 6 years old. And I bought it because, and Steve, Ron, we talked about this, right? In order to help the football community in the country, we needed an in-state entity to be able to, youth football in particular, youth football is hyper-local. The football programs that I was involved in the San Francisco Bay Area are radically different than the football programs that Steve's involved in Apple Valley. I'll give you a really stupid, simple, obvious example. When it gets to 104 degrees in San Francisco, it's like, whoa, wait a minute, 104 degrees, stop everything, right? It's like that all the time down in Apple Valley. Right? So how do you manage programs, and they're in the same state, right? How do you manage those programs? You need that hyper-local sensitivity. And so the California Alliance was designed to provide that hyper-local sensitivity. So it's grassroots. It's, for and by. I'm no longer affiliated with that. It's for and by people from the state of California. But there also needs to be a superstructure because, quite frankly, there's a void at a national level with respect to the voice that we're bringing. Nobody is as much of an advocate for the sport as we are. Nobody. And if there is somebody out there that feels that they're a greater advocate for the sport, we'd love to meet you. Love to meet you.
And bring them in.
No
doubt.
Bring them in. Love to meet you.
Right.
Love to get connected and talk about it, because it's what we're really trying to do is it's not about the politics. It's not about that. We've kind of emerged. We were born out of a crisis that was conceived out of a highly misguided political individual in California, right? We were born out of that, but now we're all about the sport, the parents, the players, the coaches. How do we help them make the sport a better sport?
So Steve, take it back to you. So you were telling me that what happened last January. What is the current climate now? If obviously it sounds like from Joe's perspective, it would be on hold. But since he's not linked locally anymore, what is it? What is that climate in California?
Yeah, so this would be breaking news here because I haven't even discussed this really with the California youth football community yet. But I received an email from a lawmaker's office, I'd say just about after we met with the governor back in August, so maybe in September, saying that this lawmaker is possibly looking to maybe write a bill to have all youth football organizations in California be required to wear soft caps on their helmets. No particular manufacturer, just to wear soft caps and maybe write some legislation for that. We just went through the election. They just got back to work this month. So we'll see where that progresses. I don't really have a stand on that at this point. I don't really have a say either way if I think that's a good idea or not. I'm waiting to see if this actually progresses with that lawmaker. As far as banning youth football in California at this point, and this is not me being braggadocious or, anything like that, because I'm a pretty humble guy, and I think Joe knows that. But as long as Steve Famiano is around in California and anybody in Sacramento wants to get a crazy idea, Not going to happen as long as Steve Famiano is around wearing a youth football hat or shirt or whatever you want to do. It's not happening with me on watch. I'm just telling you that it's not going to happen.
I love that.
So
trust his gut, John. I'm telling you.
What is,
listen to his gut, man. He's got it. He's on it.
The Jack Nicholson line from A Few Good Men. You want me on that wall. You need me on that wall. That's what comes to mind here. I appreciate that. All right. Hey, okay. Can we move to third down? We good?
Yeah,
we're good.
Everybody okay? Let's kind of take a step back here and go to the most memorable experience you've had. And you can't use the political side. You have to use your personal experience with youth football, either as a player or as a parent. But most memorable experience with youth football. And there's a couple of these that are coming at you. So
no, that's cool.
Yeah.
Joe's never heard this story, so this one's gonna get Joe.
Awesome.
This is fascinating. It's such a great question because when I was running the Apple Valley Rattlers, the program, we had to rebuild that program basically from scratch. Equipment, coaching, just the whole mindset and philosophy of the program here in town had to be reset. So we didn't do too well in the beginning. We were just trying to get back to operating appropriately and getting the coaches set for success, and then ultimately having success across the league when it comes to the kids and their teams. Took about 3 or 4 years, and then we really developed some really good football teams here in town. And at the time, we were part of a conference that played we call it down the hill here, down in San Bernardino, Fontana, Ontario, Riverside, some really good football cities, even at the youth level. And Apple Valley was kind of known as, that little desert town. The little desert town team, and you'd get your butt kicked sometimes, to be quite honest with you. But one of our goals was to develop the program to be very successful on the field too, not just from a board perspective. So about 3 to 4 years into it, our junior Pee Wee team at the time, which would be anywhere from like a 12U to an 11U team. Coach Isaac was the head coach at the time. Coach Anthony, who I'm still friends with here in town, they had that team, and they took that team to the Super Bowl in our conference. And that was the first team under our leadership that we got to the Super Bowl. And the feeling of that was incredible, right? Because it was like saving youth football, right? You're reaching your goal of getting your goal accomplished. Well, that first Super Bowl win, I wasn't able to be at the game. So I'm kind of giving you a backwards answer here. It was an exciting time, but it wasn't an exciting time because I was homesick on the couch.
Well,
I couldn't go to the Super Bowl game. But I'm getting ready to cry here. Joe knows me. I get emotional about stuff sometimes. I was laying on my couch, sicker than a dog. And, man, I'll never forget Isaac telling me this. He didn't even celebrate with the kids. As soon as they won the game, I was his first call. He was standing on the field calling me. And I'm sick as a dog. I mean, I could not move. I was so sick. And he's like, Steve, we did it. We did it. It still touches me.
It
still touches me to this day. Yeah. I mean.
All right, Joe, this is the sled, right? This is where all three of us work together. Yeah. So how about you can't use one of your past stories and you can't use a political story. What's one of your favorite on the field stories or parental off the field stories?
So my one of them. So I moved back to Philly in June of 2022, and the last team I coached was a 12U team for the Southern Marin Broncos. I was a president as well, and the guy who was scheduled to head coach got sick, seriously sick. He's happy and healthy now, thank gosh, but he had to back out a week before the season started. A week. And we're sitting in the board meeting, and they're all like, well, who's going to coach? And the whole board looks at me and goes, looks like you're going to have to do it. I mean, there was no choice. So I jumped in, of course. And we went and we lost our championship. I had 32 kids, 21 were first-year players. 10 at 11 and 12 years old. We ran a single wing, John. There were plays. There were games where I called 3 offensive plays the entire game. Three different. It was I called
Yeah,
the
I
same
think you've
play.
talked to our listeners about that. Yeah,
So
that's awesome.
that season was by far, and that was the last season that I coached in California.
If you guys could work on that story so that it was Coach Isaac that beat Coach Joe, even though they didn't play each other, that would make the story phenomenal. I'm going to share. Obviously, I do not have near the experience in the years in youth football, other than playing. But I will tell you that my first memories of football were my first years of playing, very young, and I'm saying U8. I think I was actually 5 or 6 when we were playing, and I played for the Danley Bees because every school was associated with a YMCA and then the high school that they would feed into. And so I was at Danley Elementary and at the Southeast YMCA in Montgomery, Alabama. Had a big R on my helmet, and it wasn't for Reagan. It was restricted because the rule had nothing to do with technology or anything else. It's like that dude's too big to be having the ball in his hand, so he's not allowed to carry the ball. I could recover fumbles, couldn't advance them, all that kind of fun stuff. And I got to play that very first year. We played our championship game in Crampton Bowl, which was also the home of some high schools, but it also used to be where the Blue-Gray All-Star game was played. And in the old days, again, we're talking 45 years ago now, there was only the Blue-Gray game and the East-West Shrine game. That was all there was for seniors in college to show their prowess to the pros, scouts. And that's where they played. And so I thought it was the coolest thing that here I was in November, and I'd be back there in December with my grandfather on, I think they played Christmas Day, actually. Wow. And watching, the seniors in college, I'd be back at the same place that I was playing for my first championship in football. It's crazy because if you said, what else do you remember when you were 5 or 6 years old? I don't know if I have any other memories. I probably, and maybe that's because I got hit in the head too many times. But I really, it's just amazing that that's what we associate it with. Because I remember my teammates, I remember how we won the game. It's youth football has a very special part in our country, in all honesty, and the makings of who a lot of our people are. Okay, so this is third. There was a penalty, flag thrown. So we got another. It's still third down. Changing it just a little bit for you, Steve. Joe and I give advice every week to parents, but kind of putting you on the spot with this. What advice would you give a parent who's not sure and is trying to decide if his son or daughter, his or her son or daughter, should play youth football this coming fall? Or what information would you give them, whether it's advice or not?
I wouldn't even give them information. I mean, if you're running a league, say if you're a president or a coach in a league, or even if you're like a team AD or a team mom, and I used to do this with the Rattlers, and I've given this advice to all kinds of youth football leaders that I've dealt with here now because of the Save Youth Football movement. And how do you get these? How do you convince these parents, right? Like they just don't want to sign them up. You got to get those parents to your field. Somehow, whatever, you invite them to your field. You invite them to a practice. You show them exactly what it is their child's going to get involved with, and it clicks, right? It's no different than buying a car, typically. I mean, I know a lot of people maybe buy cars online now, I guess, or something, or they go pick it up. But typically, if you're that person that likes to feel and touch things when you buy something, you get to feel the field. You get to touch you get to feel it. And you can experience it that way. And once you see it, because part of the problem we have in society now, and it all goes back to this banning youth football thing. There's too much negative media out there to put something in someone's mind that they shouldn't sign their kid up for football. And there's not a lot of positive media to tell people they should sign them up for football. That's where we come in as leaders in this industry. And that's where, like, NFA that's a great thing too, right? From a national perspective of twisting the media narrative and getting involved and getting your kid involved in a positive thing, but getting them to the field. And it's funny, I tell people that, and a lot of people are shocked that I say that. They're like, wow, really? And I'm like, yeah, I mean, you could walk up to a parent in the grocery store, which I've done before, right? You see a parent with a kid and you're like, hey, your kid plays sports, and you kind of recruit them that way to come play for your organization. But the best way is to get the mom, dad, whoever out to the field, and you kind of do an orientation introduction with them. It's kind of hard if you're at the end of the season, but even if you want them to come back next season, even have them come out to the playoffs, if you're in the playoffs or whatever. Come and look at what we do. Experience this. And it never failed me.
Think about it, John. That's great advice. I mean, for me, and I'm not. Steve knows I'll disagree with him if I want to. I'm not just blowing smoke here, but the wisdom in what he just said there is the same thing that high schools do. It's the same thing that colleges do, right? When you're recruiting a kid, it's like, hey, come see our program. Now, it's much easier to see a big college program than it is a smaller college program, or it's much easier to go see a high school game than it is sometimes a youth game. But the thing I love about that, Steve, is number one, it's consistent with other levels of play. Number two, it creates transparency. Right?
Yes.
You get to see, and so the coaches know that like you're now recruiting, and parents are going to be there and they're going to be watching. That keeps everybody on if there are some leagues out there, which we know there are, that might not be really kind of running things in I'll call it a role model manner, right? Now they're going to have to be put to the test of can they actually are new families willing to bring their kids into the program. The other thing I've seen that it's kind of similar to that, Steve, is getting the other parents. Like when I was with the Broncos, Southern Marin, California, my parents were my best recruiters.
Yes.
My parents would go around. I had people would call me. Yeah, I got your name from Johnny, who's a player, and the parents just love the program. How do I sign them up? I'm still getting emails and texts now for Southern Marin Broncos. People are like, can you get me in touch with them? My friend wants to play, and we went to school with your kid. Can you make the introduction? So that word of mouth, I think, is another. It isn't anything you can. You can steer towards it by encouraging the parents. Like I used to tell the parents, our best recruiters are you. When you're sitting at a cocktail party and somebody says, another parent looks at you and says, you let your son play football, and gives like a derogatory attitude, I said, that's when I want you to step into that conversation. And I want you to say, I actually do. My son plays for the Southern Marin Broncos, and I'm really proud of it. Why do you think playing football at the youth level is not so good? I can tell by your comment. Well, have you seen this, this, and this? And they go, yeah. Where'd you get your medical information from? Twitter? Right? No, that's not real science, right? So getting the parents, I think, to be a part of that recruiting process can supplement and augment what you're suggesting, Steve.
Well, and real quick, let me add a spin on this too. So this is not about getting kids to sign up for football, but one thing that I learned in this Save Youth Football and fighting the state of California movement was I learned something that I have been trying to explain to leaders of football across California, and this could happen across the United States. What you should be doing, if you want to help stop this problem in your local cities, you need to invite your mayor, your city councils, your assembly member, all the way up to your senator or whoever. Invite your politicians to come out to your field. Get them involved in youth football so that they understand the same thing that parent that's apprehensive about playing, that doesn't want to have their child play. Get them that perspective too, because they're sitting in an office in Sacramento reading a bill and hearing a bunch of gibberish. Right? So there's different aspects here too, and it's on our part to educate, and that's, I mean, I know some people just want to coach, right? I get it, but education on our end is key too.
Yeah, the other thing, John, like youth football, I think for most of society, unless you have a kid who's in it, youth football is like a black hole. Nobody knows anything about it.
Right.
Everybody knows about high school football. Yeah, they play in a stadium right over there. I drive by it every, I see the lights on every Friday night. Everybody knows about college football. Youth football, what? It's people have no idea what it is, how it's structured, how it's played, and people automatically equate the game that they watch on TV on Saturdays and Sundays and Monday nights. They equate that to what's going on at the youth level, and it's not. Or they might equate Friday night tykes, or they might equate some stupid, some really. And Steve, you've shared these in the Save Youth Football California Facebook group, like these coaches that run these practice drills that are they're just bad drills. They don't teach kids how to play the game, right? So they're misguided in some of their actions, and people think like that grabs their attention, and they think that the entire sport's like that, and it just isn't. Sure,
I think that, like with anything, right? Anytime there is information out there, the information doesn't have to be factual, right? And then
right.
Even if there are facts, if those facts aren't put into context, then again, you have no way to group them together and to really paint the picture. And I think that's the challenge, at least for me, constantly with my own kids, with my own son going through it, with my daughter playing softball all the way through the youth travel world and excuse me, and then into college ball. It was to, hey, let's gather the information. Let's really look into it. Let's figure out what it is. Because if I equated my daughter's 14U national elite travel team to the women's fast pitch professional league, it's funny, right? But it's not funny when it comes to football. People do it all the time because they don't gather the information. Right. I think the important piece that both of you are advising is, hey, let's get the information and let's make sure that it's real information, right? Let's look into it like we would anything else.
So for the parents that may be listening, one of the things that we advocate for in the National Football Alliance is a well-informed parent. Mm-hmm. The better informed you can be, the better decisions you can make. Whether and you do this now. You do this now in the classroom when you go and meet with Johnny or Mary's teacher, and you get information about how they're doing in school. You do it when you have your kids at the doctor. You go to the doctor with them. You get information, right? You're always gathering information, and whether they're playing football or baseball or basketball or wrestling or whatever, lacrosse, you want to be informed about the programs that you're sending your kids to, regardless of sport. And like Steve said, go out in the fall, go out and watch, find a game, watch some practices, watch a game, get a first person perspective of it, because the truth is, if you see a program and you don't like what you see, you can go across the street, right? Across the street in air quotes, right? You can go around the corner, right? You can go to the other side of town and find another program that might be a better fit for you.
No doubt. There's plenty of opportunity, and we're going to continue to aim to make sure that those opportunities exist.
Right on. Always.
All right, Joe, I'm going to let you take us to fourth down here.
Fourth down. So, Steve, so since you and I are – now, here's a funny thing, John. I think Steve and I have physically been together 2-3 times. I think maybe twice.
Three, probably 3 times. Definitely at Sacramento a couple times for some of the committee stuff.
Yeah, Sacramento. There was a conference we went to in Orlando once.
Okay, take us forward, because I know that's not the point of the conversation. What's our listeners?
So here's the point.
Are really wondering where you're going with this, Joe.
Here's how I'm going with it. So I know Steve is a recent, not too recent, but he's now a grandfather.
Oh, congratulations!
Thanks.
And I love seeing him post on Facebook about his grandson and how much time he spends with him, and it gives me a lot of joy to see him having that life experience. So, how's it going? And what's next? What do you love about being a grandfather, dude?
Man, that's way too tough of a question, Joe. Because it's still pretty new. But let me back up here, because I want to help John understand what you were kind of getting at with that. Because there's perspective on what you were talking about being physically together, right?
Right.
we've known each other for 6 years in this work with Save Youth Football Alliance, now your National Football Alliance, and you developing this and everything that's gone on. Our relationship is basically, this sounds really weird, I guess, but it's an online relationship. Like, we physically only have been in front of each other's faces 3 times in 6 years. Think about that. And that relates to our relationship and the work that we did and how we were able to accomplish that work doing this through phone, email, and videos like this. But developing a brotherhood that's incredible. You know what I mean? And I think that puts some context on that and how it relates to the work that we did, because typically you would think people are in a room together accomplishing, incredible goals, but sometimes that's not happening. And then getting back onto the being a grandfather thing, I just
so John, there's a little bit of bromance going on here, John.
Oh no, don't.
I'm hearing it. Can we go on to the grandfather thing, please?
That's going to be a chapter in the book, Bromance.
Right, Bromance.
I'll let y'all write that chapter.
Oh man. So my grandson's a year and about 4 months now, and man, it's really. I tried to explain it to Joe when we were talking on the phone not too long ago, but it's such an I don't know. It's just an incredible experience. You have the love for him, but you don't have to put him to bed at night typically, and do all the other things you would do with your sons or your daughters, right? Like, they're not with you all the time. But it's fun just seeing him do things, and he's oh man, I cannot wait till he gets into sports. He's climbing ladders already. I was up on the ladder, and he's climbing up the ladder with me, and he loves being outdoors. I mean, he does not want to stay in the house. He does not. He'll take you to the door and say, "Take me outside."
So, John, this is another reason why
awesome.
Football's safe in the state of California, because there's
No doubt.
There's a Famiano coming. There's another generation coming up who's got to play.
To get through the Famiano.
Apple Valley's already got him lined up on a roster at some point in the future.
I know what year Steve's going to be coaching again, too.
Oh, here we go. You know what I mean? It's like, no, I definitely would coach him. But here's the cool part, though, right? We talk about signing your kid up for football or not signing him up or whatever. It's ultimately going to be, my son and daughter-in-law's choice and his choice, too, if he wants to wind up playing football. Just because I love football and I've done everything that I've done, locally in the community and across the state and saving youth football in California, that's not a guarantee that he's going to play football, because I definitely want him to be able to, grow as a person how he needs to grow. I would never force him into playing football if that's something he wouldn't want to do. But I think when you're a child and you're around a football guy, it's kind of
there's some osmosis there.
It's sure right. No, it's
football coaches raise future football coaches.
Right.
Right, John?
I hope not, but I have a feeling I think it's going that direction right now. I just spent a week with my son, so I think
that's right. John, John and I have had some of these conversations, and Steve, John and I are early in our relationship, but it's tracking the same way that you and I have tracked.
I'm not part of the chapter.
So I said, but I talk about the bromance, right? And John, you and I have clicked. You and I have clicked in a way that is similar and different to the way that Steve and I have clicked, which is why I say football coaches raise future football coaches.
Yeah, no doubt.
That's true.
Right on.
Well, Steve,
all right.
Really thank you for joining us on this episode and giving us some background and some insight into everything y'all have done. And we're going to have to continue doing it, whether it's in California or anywhere else.
True.
And I hope that our listeners know that there is now, if you're a youth football leader and you're looking for help, find National Football Alliance. We're here to be a part of that and to help you move forward with your state, wherever that may be. Before we wrap up here, I do want to tell our listeners, Joe, remind our listeners, you brought it up last week. Next week's the American Football Coaches Association convention in Charlotte, North Carolina. Joe and I will both be there in a little bit different capacities, but if you are able to, if you're a coach or a listener or a parent and you're going to be there, please look us up. Come say hello to us. We will look forward to seeing you. Without anything else, I'll say that's a wrap on episode 6. Thank you for joining us on the Unscripted Huddle, and know that we are here for all of you to improve, honor, and advance the sport of tackle football.
Thanks, John. Steve, we'll have you back at some point in the future and keep telling the story.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate you.
Well, that's it for this week. Let's keep the conversation going to help NFA honor, advance, and improve the game of football. Thanks for listening, and join us next time for another set of downs on the Unscripted Huddle.